Tonight, Joe Biden flies into town with sharp words for the PM. Reports of a diplomatic rebuke over his flaunting of the Northern Ireland Protocol. How's that going to go down in Cornwall? Patience is thin. Talks between the UK and the EU ended without progress. So is America's president willing to bang heads together? Tonight we talk to those involved in implementing the protocol and perhaps overseeing its demise and ask where this could all end up. Also tonight, dangerous insulation presents a new cladding crisis, leaving leaseholders trapped in unsafe houses with extortionate bills.
I couldn't sell, and it's been going on for nearly 2 years now.
So you can't sell this property?
No, it's valued at zero.
And was coronavirus leaked from a lab? We investigate those rumours about the origins of the virus. Hello, good evening. The world stage is set on a Cornish beach. The sun is out, the big guns have arrived. Just one problem for the PM, however, is they may currently appear aimed at him. Tonight reports that the American president, on his first trip outside the US, has made plain his unease about the Prime Minister's position on that Northern Ireland Protocol. Any breaches, he's warned, are of grave concern. Now, to some, those breaches are about sausages. To others, they're about trust. The UK wants to know why it can't export its own meat within its own sovereign territory. The EU tells Britain knows the answer already. The formal protocol both sides signed into law after the backstop was rejected and Brexit left few other options. So can the two sides work it out? Can America find a solution if they can't? And what happens to our trade if nothing is resolved? Nick Watt is here. Just take us through what we're hearing tonight from the president's first words as he landed.
Well, that's right. I mean, all the mood music on the record from the White House is that Joe Biden will be even-handed, messages to both the UK and the EU to try and resolve their differences. But pick up the front page of the Times tomorrow, and it talks about how Joe Biden has issued a warning, a message to the UK to stop inflaming tensions over Northern Ireland and with Europe. Now, what the Times have got is a memo of a meeting that Yael Lumpert, who is the United States Chargé d'Affaires in London, a meeting with Lord Frost, the Brexit minister, on the 3rd of June. And in this, it said that they implied in this meeting that the UK was inflaming tensions. It's described as a démarche. It's strongly worded and talked about how that the UK should come to a negotiated settlement. Interestingly, it says the US would like to see the UK follow agricultural rules, EU agricultural rules. That would be the way of resolving this issue. The UK is very clear. We cannot follow EU rules. That's not Brexit. That means if you do that, that you end up under the European Court of Justice.
Now, David Frost asked the EU for more pragmatism today, and the EU suggested that if Britain went it alone, then there would be some kind of sanctions, some kind of tariffs. Now, at this point, people sort of get out of bounds, start talking about a trade war. So what does a tariff or a sanction actually mean here, Nick?
Well, the heart of Great Britain's relationship with the European Union, because obviously Northern Ireland is different, is zero tariffs and zero quotas. If the EU was to pick those apart, that would have serious consequences, tariffs, for the car industry and for the agricultural sector. But anything that the EU decides to do has to be proportionate, and there's an arbitration mechanism. So something involving a row over health certificates on sausages travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, you couldn't really then sort of punitively have a big impact on the whole of the Great Britain economy. But look, this Brexit row is playing out just on the eve of Boris Johnson taking to the world stage. A generation apart, standard bearers for different political outlooks. Two leaders heading for their first encounter in difficult circumstances. A seaside meeting, no doubt with plenty of smiles, but deep concerns in Washington over Northern Ireland and its future in the world of Brexit. Touching down and getting to the point post-haste. a warning from Washington that the UK-EU impasse over Brexit could jeopardise the Good Friday Agreement. A diplomatic message for all.
The United States still has what it takes to rally the world's democracies to solve the great problems of our time.
But then this.
Our concern runs very deep on the Northern Ireland issue.
An unmistakable raising of the diplomatic eyebrow. Northern Ireland runs deep for this president.
He is Irish American. He's proud of it. He constantly refers back to his heritage. He's also really proud of his work as a statesman, as a United States Senator. He was one of the key backers of George Mitchell, who was the diplomat, who was a former member of Congress himself, who was charged by President Clinton with hammering out those accords. So there's something personal in it for him because he's Irish and because he's actually worked on it himself.
The US intervention comes amid a standoff between London and Brussels over the Northern Ireland Protocol, a key part of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal to guarantee no hard border on the island of Ireland.
Today, I can say we are at the crossroads in our relationship with the UK. Trust, which should be at the heart of every partnership, needs to be restored.
Milder language from the UK, but definitely not yet friends.
There weren't any breakthroughs, there aren't any breakdowns either, and we're going to carry on talking.
Pressure for agreement ahead of a 30th of June deadline for the ending of grace periods designed to ease the impact of checks in the Irish Sea. At the heart of this row, where to place the EU's border with its recently departed member state. The EU's chief Brexit negotiator originally proposed checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland to avoid that hard border on the island of Ireland.
And no UK Prime Minister could ever agree to it.
No to that from Theresa May. Her backstop, to be triggered in the event of no deal, would have kept Northern Ireland almost wholly within the orbit of the EU. A bit like today. But Great Britain would have had a basic customs union with the EU, thereby avoiding checks on the Irish Sea. A new Prime Minister and perhaps a sense of déjà vu. Boris Johnson signed a deal involving checks on goods travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, though they are lighter than the original EU idea. In meetings here in Downing Street after signing his Brexit deal with the EU, Boris Johnson was warned in minute and precise detail by the DUP leadership about the consequences of placing Northern Ireland in such a different relationship with the EU to the rest of the UK. No chilled meat, that's sausages, allowed to travel from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, he was warned. I'm told that with a wave of the arm, Boris Johnson dismissed their concerns, saying all will be fine. A leading DUP member warns of severe consequences.
The EU are insisting on going well beyond what the protocol requires of the UK government and is demanding things now which were never required in the first place.
From Sinn Féin, little sympathy for a party which campaigned for Brexit and against Theresa May's proposal that would have avoided those Irish Sea checks.
We wouldn't be having these conversations if we didn't have Brexit. So protocol is here because of Brexit, a Brexit which the DUP helped to champion, helped to deliver, dismissed every other version of Brexit. So what we're dealing with now is the reality that's been brought about by the DUP in cahoots with the British government.
A veteran Conservative advisor on Northern Ireland says the EU should be more flexible.
It's clearly insane that a single packet of sausages destined for a Sainsbury's store in East Belfast has to undergo checks for fear that it might illegally enter the EU single market when Sainsbury's doesn't have a single store in the EU.
Hardly the season for a fireside chat, but a tete-a-tete, no doubt with some warmth, that may well set the mood for Britain's relations far and wide.
Nick, what there? Well, we did ask the UK government for an interview tonight. They said no. We're joined now by Mick Mulvaney, former US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland under President Trump, Lord Dodds, former Deputy Leader of the DUP, and Claire Hanna, the MP for South Belfast from the SDLP, Labour's, as it were, sister party in Northern Ireland. Welcome to you all. Mick Mulvaney, if I can start with you, particularly on those comments that are just coming through to us, reported in the Times tomorrow, of these very strong words, a strong rebuke about Boris Johnson for inflaming tensions over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Are you surprised to hear Joe Biden issuing such a strong rebuke, albeit through his staff and his ambassador?
Yes, I was. And thanks for having me, Emily. In fact, I've talked to some Democrats today on Capitol Hill, and they didn't indicate this was coming. So my guess is many American politicians on both sides of the political aisle will be a little bit surprised by this formal démarche. It's a very strange way to start the conversation. In fact, it's sort of is self-fulfilling when you're accusing Boris Johnson of inflaming the debate. One way to actually inflame the debate is to send a formal démarche. So instead of saying, look, can we sit down and talk this through, to send that level of diplomatic communication as an opening salvo was very surprising, and I don't think very productive.
Where do you think it will take things?
Well, I hope it gives them an opportunity to sort of step back and say, look, we should be able to work this through. Your introduction was well done. The amount of commerce that moves from the island of Great Britain into Northern Ireland that has the risk of crossing into the EU across the border into the Republic of Ireland is so infinitesimally small, it's hard to believe that's really what we're talking about. Similarly, the things that Britain has done to sort of unilaterally change the protocol is the type of thing that should be able to get worked out. So again, I'm surprised that the U.S. seems to be sort of flaming things itself, when leveler heads is probably what we need right now.
It's interesting that you call it inflaming. I guess it's sort of, when Joe Biden promised, America was back, isn't this what he means? He means he comes in and he says it like it is, and we know that he's got Irish roots. He cares very deeply about the Good Friday Agreement. He wants to see peace preserved.
We all want to see peace preserved. We want to see the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, preserved. President Biden needs to remember that part of the Good Friday Agreement respects the union of the Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So, when you talk about America being back, I thought that was sort of what Joe Biden didn't like about Donald Trump. Again, I think the policies between the previous administration and this administration are pretty much aligned, which is that we wanted to have everybody sit down and walk through what should be a negotiable type of thing. So to come in and sort of beat your chest and send a formal démarche, I'm not sure we've sent a formal démarche to Iran or China since Biden has been president. Maybe we have, and it hasn't got that much attention. So to start with that level of rhetoric, I think, is the thing that has a lot of us here scratching our heads.
Let me just bring in Nigel Dodds, Lord Dodds. Where do you think these negotiations can go? I mean, when you hear patience is wearing thin, do you think nothing's going to happen between the EU and the UK this week?
Well, it's the hope of everybody that we can arrive at sensible negotiated outcomes, but it will require much greater movement away from tragedies than we've seen from the European Union thus far. I mean, the European Union was prepared on the 29th of January to unilaterally invoke Article 16 of the protocol, which would have basically set aside provisions and imposed a hard border in the island of Ireland for vaccines, of all things. So, when people talk about good faith and trust, it works both ways, and the EU have breached trust as far as the protocol is concerned for the people of Northern Ireland.
To be fair, they rode back from that, and I think the space of 3 hours. But
the damage was done, Emily. I mean, the damage was done because it showed a willingness, and they also reserved the right to do it again. And when you think of the damage being done societally, environmentally, economically, the diversion of trade that's happening in Northern Ireland, which are all conditions for action by the British government, those have been well met, given the enormous disruption to trade in Northern Ireland.
You were there throughout the negotiations, Nigel Dodds, for a lot of this time. Now, David Frost suggested today that this had all been more difficult than he'd anticipated, certainly than Boris Johnson had anticipated. Is your recollection that Boris Johnson just had no idea what this would entail, that he had no idea how this would turn out? Was that what you recall?
Well, first of all, Theresa May's backstop, which people now seem to look back on fondly, did have a regulatory border down the Irish Sea and did place Northern Ireland inside the EU customs union, albeit it tacked on some temporary rickety regime which would keep Britain temporarily aligned, but it wasn't part of the treaty. So that was no good. But you're right to point out that when the protocol was brought forward at the end of the negotiations in October 2019 by David Frost and Boris Johnson, we in the DUP warned in the House of Commons in private meetings. There were cabinet papers which illustrated in full detail the full implications and consequences of this protocol. So yes, there may be some areas where it has gone further than it should, but the basic fundamental problems of the protocol were well known when the British government signed up to it, unfortunately.
Why do you think they did then? I mean, why do you think that was ignored?
The reason why it was done, which they said and have said since, is that they worried that Brexit wouldn't get done, that this would be something that needed to happen, but that when Britain had, the United Kingdom had full sovereignty, then the matter would be addressed. There's no doubt that the full consequences of this have taken people, some people by surprise in Whitehall who didn't look at the detail very, very closely. And the fundamental point is this: if checks and infrastructure in the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic could destabilise the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements and peace, likewise, checks and infrastructure between Northern Ireland and Great Britain will do exactly the same. And in order to ensure that we have stability and preserve the peace and political process, we must not have checks either north-south or east-west. That's the fundamental.
Claire Hanna, you can see how this feels to the UK government, that the EU seems intractable and the UK just wants economic and territorial integrity, which was at the centre of Brexit.
Well, I don't think it's credible to say that they didn't understand what was coming. It was clear to many of us well in advance of Brexit that there would be friction somewhere. That was what the project was always going to involve. But it is fair to say that while nobody loves the protocol, I think there is a gross distortion of the impact that it's having. It is causing frustrations for people, particularly for smaller businesses, and it has annoyed people. But that is being elevated to some sort of Mad Max scenario where people are implying there are empty shelves and mass disorder. And that really isn't the case. I mean, there's clearly a community that are very upset about the concept of a different set of regulations in Northern Ireland than in Britain. But the protocol is being used as a receptacle for decades of grievance and frustration about a lack of political delivery. There are solutions there. I mean, a veterinary and SPS deal, even potentially with a sunset clause that would mean it could go either when the UK figure out what they want to do with Brexit, or indeed when some of the infrastructure is in place for things like trusted trader schemes. But that requires goodwill, and it requires the UK, I suppose, to implement what they've signed up to. To this point, this is really about keeping your word, and it's about a rules-based order.
Claire, I'm going to let you press the little sign that says we still want to keep you. There you go. We've got you back. I do have to remind you, though, that just weeks ago, we were seeing all kinds of rioting and unrest on the streets of Belfast. So to call it a kind of political hyperbole is to ignore the reality, isn't it?
No, it's not, and I'm not denying the frustration and the sense of hurt that, because the SDLP has said for many years that borders have symbolic value. But even if you look at the placards on those demonstrations, they talk about concerns about policing. Some people are referencing economic dislocation. The same young man who made headlines a few weeks ago by talking about not ruling out violence at a parliamentary select committee was interviewed by the BBC after those riots saying, I don't really know what the protocol is, but my political leaders keep telling me I'm losing. And It is indeed those leaders who have brought us to this point by shutting off and voting against all possible alternatives to Brexit.
As an outsider, as it were, Mick Mulvaney, what would be your message? What would you say to Nigel Dodds tonight, or any other Northern Irish politician who says it's ridiculous that you can't get sausages from one side of Britain to the rest of the UK without filling out a form?
Briefly, the message to the EU would be, let's calm down. This is not that big a deal. The flow of trade should not be a threat to the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. For the folks who live on the island of Ireland, or within the UK government, I'm sorry, let's not do things unilaterally. Let's sit down and talk about that. Most importantly, to my own government, can we please get some ambassadors in place? Can we please put a special envoy in place? And can we please understand that when we are the ones who are stirring things up and inflaming it, it is not going to help.
Would you get rid of the protocol?
No, it's not my place. The protocol was agreed to between the UK and the EU. Again, we are not even signatories to the Good Friday Agreement. We are very interested third parties who want to see this part of the world that so many of us are from succeed. There are tremendous opportunities available to Northern Ireland. If this all goes well, be the only place in the world that will have full access to the UK market and to the EU market. The potentials here are great. Let's not lose sight of that.
So your fortunes, Nigel Dodds, at the moment are with your new leader, Edwin Poots. This is the man your party has tasked with getting you out of this. Can he?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we now have a situation in Northern Ireland where we have taxation without representation, a principle that would be very familiar to Mick, where laws will be made for Northern Ireland in Brussels without any input from any elected representative, either at Stormont in Belfast or in Westminster in London. And, only the other day, Marks and Spencer said that it was going to cost them £30 million extra a year because of the protocol. A freight pallet normally costing £100 is extra cost £50 to £350 per freight pallet. That was the information given to us today to the House of Lords Select Committee on the protocol, of which I'm a member. These are real problems, real issues. So there's the trade problems that need to be sorted out, but there's also the democratic deficit, the constitutional situation, whereby Northern Ireland is now placed under EU rules and the European Court of Justice, and there's no say or vote or role for any elected representative, and that is, in the 21st century, unconscionable.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for joining us this evening. Appreciate it. The fire at Grenfell told us in the most devastating way imaginable about the dangers of flammable cladding. Since that fatal night, many living in buildings with a similar cladding have found themselves facing not just the worry, but also the vast expense of living with a material deemed illegal or unsafe. It isn't just cladding. Flammable insulation lying within many properties is making them expensive to insure and impossible to sell. One building in Manchester, Transport House, has just presented its residents with a renovation bill for £97,000 each. Is anyone willing to accept the blame for this? And how do we find out the scale of the problem? Here's Lewis Goodall.
Do you know how safe your home is? Whether it was built properly? How much it might cost to correct the problems? Well, the leaseholders of Transport House in Salford have all too clear an idea.
The whole ethos of the building when it was originally developed and sold to us by Oa Valley was that it was available to key worker people and a shared ownership with the option to step up and buy more and more, so that it would be affordable to give us a foot on the ladder.
Next week is 4 years since the catastrophe at Grenfell Tower. In its wake, changes were made to rules about what materials are allowed on tall buildings, their cladding. But there are other, less well-known changes now being made to government regulations for what is within buildings, like insulation and cavity walls. Changes required, ministers say, to make buildings safe from flame. Freeholders across the country are commissioning those assessments, and leaseholders in Transport House, first built in 2005, are among the first to be told what their problems are.
So John, yeah, just show us what this material is here.
Well, yeah, the facade and insulation is just ordinary polystyrene, which is flammable, and it just has a thin coating over the outside to make it weatherproof.
And that runs throughout the entire building?
Yes, yeah.
And it's the main insulation for the building?
Yeah, it's the insulation and the and the facade. And
it's flammable?
And it's flammable, yeah. It doesn't resist the required level of transmission of flame.
The problem here then is mainly the lack of fire cavity breaks and a flammable insulation, and it's going to cost a fortune to fix. Several weeks ago, the leaseholders received this letter from the freeholder, Irwell Valley Homes. They said, "We have been working with chartered surveyors, fire engineers and architects to explore possible solutions to resolve the fire safety issues associated with the external render and compartmentalisation at Transport House. The full removal and replacement of the render and fire cavity breaks is estimated to cost £3 million, including fees and VAT. This is approximately £97,000 per apartment." They go on to say that they, the freeholders, must carry out the work and leaseholders have to meet the cost.
Great.
Irwell Valley has given no timescale for when this will happen, but it has left the residents in a state of despair. They have no prospect of paying the money, and in the meantime, their properties have become worthless.
Yeah.
I had potential offers, but then obviously... I've never had much.
Yeah.
I've always shared apartments or shared houses, so to actually have my own space with what I thought was just like this amazing view of the city, it was exciting. I didn't have a lot of money, but I could just about make ends meet and have my own place, and that just meant the world to me.
Matt bought his flat for less than the $97,000 he's now being quoted to repair it. He desperately needs to move to a house with his daughter, and he can't.
My estate agent said, "Yeah, gonna have to take the apartment off the market." And then I started getting a little bit anxious because all of a sudden I was now trapped in limbo. I didn't know how long this was going to go on for. I didn't know how many other buildings might be affected by this. I couldn't sell, and it's been going on for nearly 2 years now.
So you can't sell this property?
No, it's valued at zero.
The government has announced the Building Safety Fund, £1 billion to help leaseholders with renovations. But that fund covers buildings 18 metres or higher. Transport House is 14 metres. And in any case, it's only for cladding. They've also said they will set up a loan scheme with cost caps at £50 a month. But for Transport House leaseholders, it would take 161 years to pay off that debt. All of this during the pandemic.
This was a summary of the lease.
And the mental and sometimes physical health of residents has deteriorated.
Last night, I'm lucky if I went to bed at 3 o'clock and I was up at 6. So I don't think I really slept. And it's just the constant worry. It's like, what's going to happen tomorrow? If, God forbid, I hope it doesn't happen, but I've worked for nothing and I'll be homeless and it's like I've done everything for nothing and the world's just crashing down on me.
The ayes to the right, 322. The noes to the left, 256.
As recently as late April, the government defeated efforts in the Commons to limit leaseholders' exposure for the 5th time, with a significant Tory rebellion in the mix. There is anger at Transport House from leaseholders at Ministers and their freeholder, Irwell Valley.
Why on earth should they be the ones who pay the price? Because the developer built them, you oversaw it, you're the freeholder, and the government regulated them. You all have part responsibility, they have none.
Okay, this is a very, very difficult situation, and as I said before, I have utter sympathy with the leaseholders in this situation. And
with the greatest respect, I don't think they need your sympathy. Your sympathy ain't much good.
Because I feel that way, and because our intention here is about making their homes safe for them, then for me, it's very much about we need to find a collaborative solution to this.
This is much bigger than Transport House. If just a small percentage of the buildings constructed in recent years have these problems or anything like them, it'll affect thousands of people. If it's a large percentage, it may even have the potential to destabilise the housing market itself.
Lewis Goodall with that report. Well, in a statement, a spokesperson for the Ministry for Housing told Newsnight building owners are responsible for making their buildings safe, including the owners of Transport House, and we expect them to take swift action to identify and fix defects, including where work has been substandard, without passing costs on to leaseholders. Well, Sir Peter Bottomley is the father of the House and led a group of 32 Tory rebel MPs in a failed attempt, finally, to write greater leaseholder protection into the recent Fire Safety Act. If we can pick up with you, Sir Peter, then, Where do you think responsibility lies then? What would you be saying to the people who are getting nearly £100,000 bills like this?
It lies everywhere except with the residential leaseholders. They don't own the building. They didn't construct the building. They didn't inspect the building. They didn't regulate the components used in the building. These homes were put up in 2004, 17 years ago, and it shouldn't have taken national government, local government, the builders, the owners, the freeholders, the component suppliers all this time. Quite clearly, these people cannot pay. Many of these homes were worth less than they were built in 2004, even before Grenfell Tower's tragedy. So I think government needs to face up to their responsibility of saying we've got to bail out these people, and then we, government, will make arrangements to chase those who are responsible. And if the extra cost to leaseholders, beyond the $5 billion that government is arranging, of which they hope to get $4 billion back from other people, but they won't go to leaseholders, if there's an extra $10 billion to find, I suggest government say, look, our contribution should be about $3 billion. Insurance companies should be about $3 billion. Local authorities, building control, should be about $2 billion. Developers and landlords should be contributing as well. Component manufacturers, but most of all, the insurance companies, because they have been insuring the developers and the professionals, the architects and the quantity surveyors who agreed to have unsafe building.
You heard what Lewis said at the end of his report, though. We have no idea the scale of this. I mean, it could have been going on for decades. It could have been going on the length and breadth of the country. We just don't know, do we?
We don't, but we haven't bothered to take the long view, as Jonathan Freedland impressed on us after the fire of London, where they set up fire courts. And within 10 years, they'd rebuilt most of the centre of London. We haven't done anything like that. We're 4 years on from Grenfell, and we've got these leaseholders facing a prospect of a life of loss of their equity and having to be paying out money which they can't afford, many of them. I think that we've really got to get the Prime Minister to get together a round table to work out what the problems are, the best estimate of what the costs are going to be, and the best way of filling the coffers to get the work done so that apartments are safe and saleable, and then chase those who are responsible. But of course, the only people who can't sue those responsible are the leaseholders, because they haven't got an interest in the property. They're the only tenants who are being forced to pay. Private tenants don't, social tenants don't. These leaseholders, who are by law only tenants, are having to.
So what would you say to them with a £97,000 bill? Would you just say, don't pay it?
Well, for those who can't, they don't need my advice. I think I'd be saying to Irwell Valley and others, get together with government and say, let's face the consequences of the situation we're in, and let's find the solution which will work. The British are supposed to be pragmatic. The Prime Minister is a pretty pragmatic person. I'm sure the Secretary of State would be too. And if you tell the Chancellor, if Rishi Sunak had to go to Salford and actually see what the problems were, I think he'd say to his people, find the arrangements which get the money spent to make them safe, make them saleable, which is good for the housing market, and then we'll chase those who are responsible.
Let me ask you briefly on that last point about the Bank of England's assessment of whether Britain's building safety scandal could cause a new financial crisis. I mean, you know, a lot of people remember where the last one originally started in the US with subprime housing. Do you think it's inconceivable this could be the same sort of thing?
It's not inconceivable. I think government would probably respond within time, to stop it being too contagious. But the fact is, a large number of the homes built over the last 15 years, these apartments, sometimes with encouragements to people to buy when they couldn't really afford it, and the same thing's going on now with some of the help to buy things, that government has to step in and take responsibility for justice, for opportunity, and for fairness. The money needs being provided now, and needs getting back from those who are responsible.
Okay.
The leaseholders haven't got the money, and they were not responsible. So the issues are very clear, and I could help the Prime Minister and the Chancellor solve it. So probably could everyone at Salford.
I'm sure he's listening, and your phone is ringing. Peter Bottomley, thank you very much. Thank you. Nearly a year and a half since COVID-19 was detected in the Chinese city of Wuhan, the question of how the virus first emerged remains a mystery. But in recent weeks, the controversial claim that the pandemic might have leaked from a Chinese laboratory, once dismissed by many as a fringe conspiracy theory, has been gaining traction. Now US President Joe Biden's announced an urgent investigation that will look into the theory as a possible origin of the disease. Our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, has this report.
The idea that COVID might have leaked from a lab isn't new. Indeed, last year, as the outbreak grew, it was Chinese scientists who were among the first to register their concerns. And then it leaked out that American diplomats had visited the Wuhan Institute of Virology, recording their safety concerns not that long before.
In Wuhan, it was an issue that was raised in a cable from the State Department. It was raised by staff themselves at the institute, highlighting that it is a less prioritized area. There's not proper funding going into developing a safety culture around biological research and dealing with dangerous pathogens.
But given the enormity of the crisis that soon enveloped the world, scientists wanted evidence but had to rely on hypotheses. Many considered the likeliest explanation was zoonotic transmission, the virus jumping the species barrier as SARS, MERS and Ebola had. From an early stage, the World Health Organization favoured the theory of transmission from animals. Scientists who questioned that idea faced professional recriminations.
Well, they seem to all assume that the zoonosis theory, hypothesis, was clearly correct. And indeed, there was a bias of over 90% that was so obvious other alternatives weren't worth looking at.
The problem with the zoonotic theory is that even after all this time, China's been unable to produce evidence, a genome of a virus living in animals that spawned COVID-19 in humans.
It is true that 18 months on, or nearly 18 months on, that we don't know more about the natural origins of the virus. We can come to whether it came from the Wuhan lab, but our first reflex would be, well, where is the similar virus in animals? And we do not know. For the first SARS virus, we knew within 1 year, and that was more than 15 years ago. Our technology is so much more powerful. It is surprising.
The Chinese embassy has given Newsnight a statement. They say, "We reject firmly the politicisation of the virus origin tracing by some US politicians. There is no evidence that the virus leaked from Chinese laboratories." Now, it would have helped their case if during the past 18 months of so many people looking for a natural source of the virus transmitting from animals to humans, one had been found. But it hasn't. Efforts by the World Health Organization, including February's visit to Wuhan, have not brought any sort of closure. Although lacking in clear answers, some members of the panel dismissed the lab leak idea.
I've yet to see any evidence at all of a lab leak or a lab involvement in this outbreak, and I have seen substantial evidence that these are naturally occurring phenomena.
But Dr. Dashak's business had been giving the Wuhan lab money for research, leading some to claim there was a possible conflict of interest. The research going on there included gain-of-function experiments, deliberate genetic manipulation in order to produce something that will spread among humans, a field of research questioned by some of the world's leading virologists.
This gain-of-function is sort of a red herring. It's a pipe dream. It sounds wonderful, the idea of predicting the next pandemic, making a vaccine, making drugs to nip the next pandemic in the bud. It doesn't bear up to scientific scrutiny. Therefore, as it's not going to produce anything, what is the point of making viruses that now adapting viruses that can infect humans, and there's no benefit? There's a finite, small risk of these viruses maybe escaping or infecting humans, and zero benefit.
Recent emails have emerged between Dr. Anthony Fauci, the American health supremo, and Dr. Dashak, in which the latter praised Dr. Fauci's bravery in rejecting the lab link theory. It's also clear that Dr. Fauci had backed US government grants to the Wuhan Institute of Virology to look at possible future pandemic strains, experiments involving genetic manipulation. Now, the investigator brought in last autumn by the State Department to search for the origins of the human COVID-19 virus has alleged that the probe was sidelined because of that American funding at Wuhan, and that the virus itself was highly likely the product of gain-of-function experiments.
So that backbone was present, and then totally bizarrely, it was combined with the receptor binder domain of a pangolin, like an armadillo. How did they get together? But then even more disturbingly, we found the so-called furin cleavage site, or scientists found, of a human being, perhaps conveyed via humanized mice. And the odds of this genetic combination coming together were calculated as 1 in the millions by one national lab, and another private, well, actually university laboratory we consulted with said it was something 1 in like 13.8 billion.
That interpretation of the virus as man-made is still not accepted, though, by many scientists. So the question now, with these competing theories, is can there ever be closure? Solid evidence of animal transmission could still emerge. As to intelligence material or a Wuhan whistleblower, that might happen, but it could just spark a fresh war of words.
I think it's not just a problem between China and the outside world. It's really a global phenomenon that needs to be addressed at the international level. So we need to put in place some sort of international oversight mechanism of these labs. We need somebody, an international body that has a mandate to keep track of these labs.
That's a project for the years ahead, not made any easier by the rival narratives over COVID and its disastrous consequences.
Mark Urban with that report. Well, just before we go this evening, let's take you through a few of the front pages. We showed you the Times at the beginning, but we'll bring you the Financial Times now, which is pretty much leading on the same sort of story. Biden to press Johnson on ending bitter Northern Ireland standoff, and army of Reddit investors homes in on Clover Heath to send stock storing. The Guardian has Matt Hancock warned of risks of not testing, say, the care homes, and girls have given up reporting abuse there. And the Daily Telegraph says, same picture of Joe and Jill Biden, but they say that Johnson and Biden are pledging to give air travel lift-off, to restart air travel between their countries as soon as possible. That is all from us for tonight. Kirsty is in Cardiff tomorrow. Do join her then. From all of us here tonight, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.